they're not willing to be involved in the community or meet people. And that may or may not be stopping you from getting to 7 figures per office, but it's a start, right? And if you don't have those relationships with people, then it's just 7-figure office is just not feasible. It's not going to happen.
All right, listen up, chiropractors. Are you chasing that 7-figure dream, but feeling absolutely stuck? You're doing the work, but are you seeing that massive growth that you know is possible? Because today we're pulling back the curtain on a doctor that didn't just break the mold, he absolutely smashed it. He built a multi-million-dollar practice with 3 locations and 6 doctors in one of the most competitive cities in America, without playing by the old rules. Forget everything you know about insurance, being the new guy, and what it really takes to scale. Dr. Dan Shaddock, a combat veteran and a team chiropractor for Texas State football, and somebody who built his empire from scratch, is about to share the exact blueprint for insane growth. He opens up about his unbreakable culture at his clinic and the sales secrets that nobody else is talking about. If you want to know how not to just survive, but to absolutely dominate in the industry, then this episode's for you. Let's go. I'm excited. I obviously did some digging, and I'll be honest, you are impossible to find anything out about. You do not have any presence on the internet. So I know very little other than what we're about to discuss today. So
yeah, that's what's up. I'm a hard guy to find, I guess, huh?
Yeah, really. Like the only thing I could find is that you obviously love the outdoors. You obviously have built a very successful practice here in Austin. And you've caught some pretty big fish and have a pretty awesome ranch. That's about all I know about you at this point. So
yeah, a big part of my life, man. I mean, obviously with the day in and day out, owning multiple offices to get away and do things you enjoy. I think that's a big part of it, that work-life balance for sure.
Totally. I'd love to have a ranch of my own someday. But so where I want to start then on that note of the challenges of finding much about you is what's maybe something unique or interesting, or what kind of got you into this unique journey of chiropractic in the first place? Because I'm honestly curious. I couldn't really find much about it, and so I'm honestly curious about it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's kind of a question, later on in my career that I get quite a bit as far as like, how'd you choose chiro? Because, I was in the Marine Corps, right? So it's like Marine, chiro, right? Completely opposite. And so people always ask that, and they're like, well, if you were in the Marine Corps, were you a chiropractor in the Marine Corps? I'm like, they don't have chiropractors in the Marine Corps. But I was in an infantry base unit. We did a lot of crazy stuff. I went to Hearst Master School, jumping out of helos and stuff. So I ended up seeing a chiro while I was in the Marine Corps, and then after the Marine Corps, and that kind of steered me into somewhat of the direction that I wanted to take. But to be honest with you, I saw the chiro, but I originally kind of wanted to be a PT. And so I started to go to school for PT, and then it just kind of wasn't really what I wanted to do after I shadowed someone. And so went on with chiro.
What was it about PT that steered you towards chiro?
Man, if I be honest with you, I went and shadowed a PT, not to like disc physical therapy or anything, but it just was not for me, man. It was very boring. I just couldn't do it. It was just the same thing over and over and over. And it just wasn't for me, man. So
did you know I used to be an occupational therapist by trade?
An OT?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a good profession though.
It is, except for you mentioned why I got out of it.
It's because of the monotony.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons, but that was one of many that steered me away from it. Yeah. So props on you on figuring that before I did.
Beforehand, yeah. But OTs, man, they're super in demand right now.
Yeah. Especially male OTs specifically. Yeah. I mean, my graduating class I was 2 males of 34. All the rest were female. Yeah, but I also don't like trading time for money and everything that goes of that nature. Right. Yeah.
How many years ago were you done with it?
5.
5 years.
4 or 5 years ago, something like that. It was the right choice.
Yeah.
It was great. I had somebody actually once tell me that it was a gift from my former self, which I think is a nice way of saying is like you messed up and you learned from it.
Right. Right. No, I get it. No, I mean, not to diss PT, man, but for me, it just was too similar to what you say. It's probably the same thing over and over and over. Whereas chiro, man, I mean, you see a whole you're shooting imaging, you're diagnosing. I think even back in the day, I mean, PTs are considered doctorates now, right?
Yep.
But back in the day, they weren't. So the lack of being able to diagnose, things like that.
So you started the practice almost immediately after getting out of school, correct?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, I graduated, I believe it was around August 2010, and then kind of jumped right into it, man. I mean, I had visited Austin back and forth during chiro school, and I just saw the growth and the health conscious people here, and I was like, I think this is kind of where I want to start the journey, and literally started the first practice, man, from the ground up. I knew 5 people here. That was it. So,
How did you have the goal to start a practice that early?
Look, I'll be honest with you. I have, maybe the Marine Corps gives me that drive. I don't really know what it is, but I saw a vision. I started it, and to be quite honest with you, almost failed. Right. And I got to the point where I was like, I can't do this. It was making no money, wasn't really, kind of just stayed static. So crazy story, but I actually was going to go be the chiro on Lackland Air Force Base. And I went through the whole process, background check, everything, all the way up to signing the documents, and literally was going to move to Helotes. And something told me, just don't do it. So I didn't do it, and I stuck it out, and then here we are today.
So do they have chiros now?
Yeah.
So was that going to be like the original of chiros in the Marines?
At the very beginning, yeah, because now they have them on every single VA hospital and base.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, can we go back again to that moment of where you thought you were going to give it all up? So I'm curious, has it been the same name from the beginning? Has it been the same practice from the beginning? And what was going on at the time?
Yeah, originally, so my risk factor going into it, I knew was huge, right? And there was a doctor, Dr. Royce Borho. I actually went in and shared space with him, but I basically ran my own practice, right? And it was literally right down the road here by Jack Allen's kitchen, not too far, right? So that's why I told you when I came over here, I was like, man, I haven't been over here in forever. And this kind of brings back memories from kind of where it started. So yeah, I shared space in there just to kind of limit my risk, right? Because at the time, I think I was paying like $1,400 a month. Like that was my half. And that was a ton of money, right? And so anyway, so I started there and then basically hit a certain amount of numbers per week, kind of pretty static. And then I ended up jumping in and I signed that 10-year lease on the first practice location. There's a reason though, man. So going back to, I think we had talked about it earlier, I had maps, right? And I pinned every single chiropractor on the map. And I was like, where's the growth of Austin? Where's it going to be? Where can I kind of get in there? Because I was like a nobody, man. And so when I pinned all of these, I saw the location, Slaughter Manchac, and I was like, this is going to blow up. I need to sign a 10-year lease, which is super freaking scary, right? But it locked me in at a lower rate for that first 10 years because I knew it was going to skyrocket. Now look at the prices in Austin. It's crazy, right? So you talk about freaking nerve-wracking, man. 10-year deal on the first practice location after sharing space, yeah.
It kind of, there's a few things that come top of mind when you're talking about this. The first is go where the puck is going, not where the puck is.
Right.
Like that's amazing advice in and of itself, which is obviously what you did with scoping out where you think the growth. Obviously it's a guess, but at the same time, it's like, it's better to take an educated guess than just like not think about it at all. And the other thing that comes to mind too is in a lot of ways, you set yourself up for forced success in terms of when you signed a 10-year lease, it was like, all right, like I have to make this work. Right. Did you feel that? Like when you signed that, was it like, okay, this is like, I have to figure this out because like, I don't have any other options at this point?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If you like look at the timeline of events from when I was sharing space over there to when I opened, I had to do full construction too as my first time ever. I had nobody giving me layouts. I'm sitting there sketching this out. I'm negotiating my contract with the landlord all on my own because I didn't have a whole lot of funds to play around with. But yeah, I mean, when you look at it, I think what I did when I did construction, I moved where I was sharing space overnight and opened the next day because I didn't want a gap for the patients. And so when I opened that 10-year, to your point, man, I was like, I have to make this work. And so there was a lot of things that transpired over that time frame to really make it work, right? And what I mean by that is getting out in the community and things like that. Very important.
Thanks for that segue. I was going to ask, so how many patients were you seeing when you made that transition to that new clinic at the time? And then what did you do to grow from there?
Yeah. I mean, when it first started, I was seeing 5 patients a week, and yeah, it was just crazy. So I remember back in the day, a chiropractor, and he gave me some equipment, and it was super old, like from the 80s. I didn't have any money, man, so I recovered them in my garage on my own, okay, with black vinyl, and made them somewhat presentable. And so I brought them into that office, and I probably saw, when I got to the point where I decided to take the next step, it wasn't an astronomical amount of patients, man, to be honest with you, but I had to get out of there because it was limiting me. So I was about 60, 65, 70 patients a week. But it started about 3, 4, 5. I was going in Saturday, Sunday. I didn't care, man. I mean, yeah. So, to answer that question, it wasn't a 200 patient visit a week clinic. It was maybe 60 to 80 at max, but probably consistent 60 to 70.
And this was just you at this time, solo show?
Yes, sir.
Did you have any support or help or mentors or coaches or anything of that sort?
That's the thing. Over the course of my career, I've never hired a management company. It was just something that, number one, looking at running what I call lean and mean, right? And so lean and mean, like I needed to decrease my overhead, so I could get ahead. I just didn't have the money to do that. I wasn't willing to do it. I was like, well, you know what? I'm just going to do these things. I'm going to learn this way. I'm going to just change it over time until I get to a point where it's solid. And, but yeah, never had a management company, never pulled a loan, just from scratch, man.
How did you know when it was time to start maybe expanding or bringing in a new hire, or like how long did that take, and how did you figure out like when was a good time to do it?
Yeah. Man, I went for many years with no operations, nothing. I mean, I was essentially hiring, terminating, HR, marketing, billing, everything. And so the first associate doctor, man, that I hired is Dr. Jeff Hall, and today's his 6-year anniversary today. And he has just been a very loyal, a Marine too, and very loyal guy, great physician, man, really good. So today's a 6-year deal. He was the first one I ever hired. So literally 6 years ago was the first associate we brought in.
So it took you a minute to like really feel confident enough to be able to bring somebody in for some help, huh?
Yeah, man. Look, you put so much, effort and things into that practice, and that's kind of your baby, right?
Totally.
And so, yeah, you bring someone in. That's a hard thing to do because you're so used to being the one guy, right? And then you have to kind of, over time, something I've learned a lot is to allow people to have different duties. You can't take it on, especially now with owning 3 offices. So,
which we'll get to how you've been able to both hire and expand and continue to maintain good talent, which is always a topic of conversation people ask me about. But before we do, I want to know more about like that initial growth phase and that growth season. So like, how are you balancing? Like you said you were working like weekends and odd hours and like coming in whenever you needed to. Was there any form of balance in your life? Like how did you manage everything? That's a lot.
Yeah. Looking back on it, I to be honest with you, I don't even know how physically it was possible. It was tough, man. not to jump ahead, I know we'll probably talk about multi offices, but I opened that second office and I was working half a day in one and going and working the second half of the day in the other one. And that went on for about a year and a half. But yeah, it just, yeah,
Do you have entrepreneurship in your family?
no.
None. So you're the first one to like, again, that just blows my mind that like you're fresh out of being a Marine, you go to school, and then you're like, I'm going to start a practice. That's
Yeah.
mind boggling to me. Like, where did you even get the idea to do that?
Yeah, man, I mean, not to jump too far back, but I grew up in a town of 2,400 people, man, and we didn't have a whole lot. My parents provided for me really well as much as they could, but yeah, no entrepreneurs. I'll take that back. My grandfather, he was a custom home builder. But as far as direct family, no. It was just something, I think I keep talking about the Marine Corps, man, but the Marine Corps is a very big part of my life because I feel like I wouldn't be where I'm at without it. But the Marines, it was just something like, hey, I want to own my own. I want to be my own, boss, I guess you can say, right? Because I think when you have that drive and motivation, I mean, you can scale it pretty large, if you just have enough, common sense into it. So I would say that that's probably the big part of it, being your own boss,
It almost feels like the Marines gave you the confidence you needed to believe in yourself that you could do certain things that you probably didn't think otherwise.
For sure. Yeah. It gives you a lot of discipline, and pros and cons, right, with the Marine Corps. But,
Because how long were you in the Marines?
just 4 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And deployed and in combat for 9 months. I was in combat for 9 months. But yeah, that's pros and cons, right? It teaches you a lot of discipline, but you also have a lot of cons associated with military, right? Some people can't handle it when they get out. And I think mainly part of the biggest problem is these veterans, they don't have something to keep them going, right? And I would say that that's important to keep your mind going, keep you busy.
Yeah, it's like an athlete that is no longer a part of a team.
Correct.
It's the exact same thing.
Yes. And, I mean, being the team chiropractor for Texas State football, I see that. These guys, they play football their whole life and then they're done. Let's say they don't go to the NFL, then what do you do? Same thing, right? It's tough.
Well, it's identity.
Right.
That's always the issue. And it took me a long time to learn that because I've had a few of my own identity crisis as well in my own life. And it took me a while to figure out that, yeah, like when you leave a team, you were an athlete. Mm-hmm. And that was your entire life and identity was wrapped up in that. And then when you're not an athlete, you question everything about the nature of the world. Same thing happens in the military. Same thing happens when somebody goes through a major relationship and there's a breakup. Same thing when you lose somebody in your life. Like, it's an identity crisis.
Absolutely.
That's what's happening.
Mm-hmm. And trying to find your way, right? Yeah.
It's a horrible feeling, but at the same time, it's also an incredible opportunity to like become new again. Mm-hmm. Almost like cliche, but like almost be reborn in a lot of ways. Is like now you have to figure out new friends, mm-hmm. new behaviors, new environments, new things to spend your time on, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a blessing in it if you can do it correctly, as you did with mm-hmm. your business. But yeah, a lot of people don't.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree with that, man. I mean, you're spot on with that. I think that, if you have a vision, these guys like trying to find their self, right? I mean, in whatever avenue that may be, but that's a tough, anything military, like you said, but seeing that vision, man, and attacking it, right? That's why people all, that term lions and sheep, right? So I think having that mentality is important for sure.
So can we get into some of the growing lessons or maybe pains of getting to that point where you were able to have, how many people are you seeing where you're like, all right, I'm confident enough to bring in this other veteran into the clinic?
Yeah. Man, that point where Dr. Jeff was brought into the first office, I would say we were seeing upwards of like 280, 300 patients a week. And that was just me. So yeah, looking back on it, man, I was seeing anywhere from 45 to 80 something in a half day. So no, that's why I got all this gray hair, man. So
That's incredible.
yeah, it was a lot. And that went on for those numbers. I just had this conversation the other day with my director of operations, and yeah, we did that for about 3 years before we hired Dr. Jeff.
So you can grind. So there's no
I used to be able to grind.
Okay.
Now I'm older.
wiser more
Yeah,
than anything, right?
right,
Like now you're realizing maybe I don't need to. What's the new source of fuel that you tap into now, right? Because I think a lot of times what I see is that sometimes there's like anger can be a really good source of fuel. And sometimes people are really good at grinding and they can just like hammer and hammer and hammer for a long time. But I think at some point the fuel kind of like dries up a little bit. I'm curious for you, like what is that? Does that ring true for you at all? Is there a new fueling you now? Like, what did it look like then versus now?
Yeah, I mean, my roles changed drastically, right? I am seeing patients still, but only 1 day a week, right? And for 5 hours, I see the public. And then once football season starts, it changes a little bit because we have team treatment and stuff. But yeah, it's just you get to the point where I guess let's call it burnout, right? And going back to that work-life balance, I feel like that's very important. And so I try to instill that in my doctors now, giving them extended weekends and things like that. But yeah, you definitely burn out. Everybody burns out, man. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Yeah. And going back to the Marines, I know I keep saying
You're
this,
fine.
but the Marines, man, like they're just built a little different, and they're go, 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 go until you can't go, which is bad for your, over time. So I would say, yeah, definitely there was a burnout period there for sure.
Have you seen parallels? I just had this thought this exact moment, so apologize. But like, do you see parallels between the Marine or military, I guess, mindset and the athlete mindset? And the reason I asked that question and the reason that came top of mind for me is because when I think about what military does well is that it helps you to set your emotions to the side and to continue to execute despite how you feel. But I think athletes probably do the same thing. So I wonder if there's like, because I remember I was once told that the best salespeople are athletes because like they're go-getters and they can set their emotions aside and they can execute.
Right.
And I just see a lot of parallels there. So that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, for sure. The collegiate players that we treat, I mentioned football, but we do see all of athletics over there at Texas State. And yeah, they're definitely the psychological component for them, right? It is huge. It's always kind of amazing to me to see these kids because they're young, right? And they have a lot on their plate. I mean, being a student athlete, they're doing schoolwork and their practice schedule is crazy. It's really, it's admiring to watch them because yes, they can turn it on and off, right? And I think as a business owner or Marine, with that mentality, I think that's being able to turn things on and off, right? And that's tough being a business owner because you're constantly thinking, hey, what could I do better? How could I make the employee's life better? What can we do here? In the unknowns, right? So being able to cut that off and on it's difficult. Yeah.
I think it's ironic too, because like I think a lot of times the ability to shut off your emotions and to get things done is an incredible skill, especially when it comes to building a business. But then on the flip side of that, I think there's a dark side of like having healthy relationships sometimes. Is like sometimes that doesn't serve so well. It's like,
Yeah, man.
it's like you can be a bit robotic. I know I am for sure. Is like I often joke is that I'm a robot because like I'm very stoic. I don't have a lot of ups and downs. I'm very like even keeled, and which is great for like getting things done, staying productive, like building a business, doing things of that nature. But when it comes to day-to-day life, I'm just kind of schmer.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's, you're even keel, man.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
No, I think, yeah, the business aspect, man, trying to find the happy medium, right?
It's hard, for sure. So this gets into leadership. So you brought on your first employee, and so you went from a role of doing all the things to now leading others and teaching them how to do those things. What did that role look like for you, and where did you get your leadership chops?
Yeah, I mean, with Dr. Jeff being the first associate that I brought into the company, that was a very large learning curve. And, you have that doctor come in, man, and, you want them to be a certain way, and that's a struggle, right? So whenever you bring that first doctor in, you're really switching, like you said, that to being more of a leader, setting an example, right? And so the first one was definitely the hardest, for sure. And then after that, all of them are hard at the very beginning, then it kind of gets a little bit easier. But I would say the leadership aspect of it, because they're looking at you, man, as kind of the, not expert, but hey, like, how would you do this, right?
So let's get into culture then. So as you've grown from one location to 3 locations, I know maintaining culture across multiple locations can be really challenging. Conversation that I have with doctors now, and something I'm starting to realize more and more, actually, and I'd be curious as your insights on this, is that I literally, actually, the episode that went out today, it was a clinician who has a 19-person team, 5 doctors under one roof, under one location. And they do it because obviously it keeps overhead super low and then allows them to make the most of the space and the facility and the team that they have
Right.
versus going out to multiple locations. Because the challenge that I've seen with other doctors that have multiple locations is like, one, of course, yes, the overhead is an issue, but the other issue is like maintaining culture. It's much harder to maintain a certain quality and culture and feel with a team or a business when you're in multiple locations. So I'm curious for you, with 3 locations around the Austin area, how do you maintain that across 3 different locations?
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent point, man. I mean, at one point I had 5 offices, right? And so 2 of them were north, Pflugerville and North Austin. So ended up selling those 2 and then now have the 3. But the thing is, to your point, man, they are so difficult to manage. And one of the things for Absolute Life Wellness Center that we really pride ourselves on, man, is providing really quality care. And I feel like when you scale it to that size, 5, it was very difficult for us to manage up there, to keep a good culture, to keep tabs on it, to keep everyone together. Because even now with 3 offices and I employ 5 other doctors, it's so difficult for us to get together, right? And so that is a huge struggle. And the people that own multi-clinic, companies that, like you said, man, that's a struggle day in and day out. How do you keep the culture? How do you keep a cohesive unit?
What have you done that works? So you had 5 at one point, and then you scaled back down to 3?
3, yeah. In my opinion, right now, 3 is doable for us. And people,
How big is the team total? Like, how many employees do you have?
I think currently we're sitting at around 24.
Okay, wow.
24 total. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, 24. And how many, was it 5, 6 doctors?
6, including myself. Yeah.
Okay. And so what have you done to maintain 3 then versus, obviously didn't work at 5, came back to 3. How do you do it with 3?
Yeah. North Austin is a whole different beast up there, and for me, like living in New Braunfels, that's like a whole nother country, dude. So, us cutting those out and being able to get rid of those offices, they had so much potential. They did well, but it was just hard for us to manage. So now with the 3, it's easier because South Austin, Kyle, San Marcos, relatively close, right? The big thing for us, we do every year, is we take the whole company on a vacation, right? And that somewhat allows us to get together, to kind of to gel, right? We also have things throughout the year. We have a doctor's trip. I take all the doctors on a trip. And so we have things set in place, and there's other little events that we'll do, company dinner or whatever. We have a company Christmas party. And so we have these things in place for cohesion. And there's not, in my understanding, there's not a lot of chiro offices or companies that are taking their doctors on a trip out of the country, or, the whole company on a vacation. So I would hope that they, appreciate that stuff, but it's designed to keep everything cohesive and have a really high functioning team.
I got the advice one time that anytime team members, more than like two, obviously, go out for like drinks or dinner or something like that, the guy told me he would give them their the business card, and that he would pay for it, because he recognized that the number one predictor as to whether somebody stays at a business or leaves a business has almost nothing to do, for the most part, with how much money they make or how convenient the commute is or anything of that nature. It's if they have at least one friend at work. That's the number one predictor, is if somebody stays at a clinic or not. So that's why doing those things like the trips that are outside of obviously like the continuing education stuff.
Right.
I'm assuming that's what you're talking about. These are like, it's a fun trip, not like a community education thing, right?
Yeah, no work.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. So like doing that is essential for retention, and retention is, every chiropractic knows, is like everything when it comes to patients, but it's also true with employees.
Right.
It's like, if you're putting the resources and energy into training somebody, and you have somebody that sticks with you for 6 years, that's incredible. Rare, but incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. And I understand that they see me as the, the boss or whatever, as you're liked or disliked. One day you're liked, one day, it's more than that to me, man. Like, I'm not, they're friends of mine, right? And I care about their success and taking them places like that so we can spend quality time together. Because to your point earlier about the frustrations with multi-clinics, it's just so, you should see us, man. Like, trying to get a lunch together or something is super difficult because everyone's different schedules, So I think that being, obviously, man, there's a work friendship divide, right? There has to be. But at the end of the day, I mean, friendship's important with these guys. I think taking them, gelling with them. Luckily, man, a lot of my providers are all huge outdoorsmen when we talk about fishing and stuff like that. So the majority of our trips involve fishing, and that's,
Works out nice for you.
Yeah. So yeah, we all enjoy it, and it gives us time to hang out, man.
Yeah, I saw you were in Cabo recently. I hear there's great fishing there.
Yeah, we used to go there every year, the doctors, but we kind of diverted to other places now. So
better fishing or something, or what?
Yeah, man. Like, you can cut all this, but Cabo is just too much of a bait and switch, man. Everything's a bait and switch.
I've been there once and I'll never go back.
I fucking hate it, dude.
Same.
So it's a fucking. Anyways, dude, I'll get mad because I can give you a lot of stories because I used to go there 4 times a year.
Damn.
And yeah, we'll just not talk about it. There's other better places.
Yeah, agreed. Totally agree. So talk to us about how you went from your first hire, which I think you said was 6 years ago, to now a 6-doctor team, including you, with a whole bunch of other staff. So that all happened over the course of 6 years. Did things just like start to ramp up really quickly? Like, how did you, I mean, that's a lot to hire, train, delegate, open new locations. Like, what happened in that 6-year window of time where things just went?
Yeah, I would have to say the biggest part of it was relationships, right? I mean, if I digress back to the early days, when I first started the first office that we were talking about, and I'm going to start from that point. Like, I used to walk around in the middle of the summer putting door hangers on people's doors because it was cheap for me to print these off. And if you saw it to this day, you'd laugh because I'm like all in a suit. It was like a glamour shot or something crazy. And so I used to put the door hangers on people's door because I had to get the word out, man. Nobody knew who I was. And so that's kind of where it started. And then the relationship building, I was doing 5 networking events a week.
Wow.
And you talk about burnout.
Totally.
And so that's kind of where it transitioned to. And then it transitioned to more into relationships with pain management doctors, neurosurgeons, orthopedic surgeons, right? And so building that network of referrals. The biggest thing, man, if I could ever talk to anyone about chiropractic, the industry, is relationships. If you don't have the relationships, you're not going anywhere. It's just my solid opinion on it.
Totally agree. And those take time, which it obviously did.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just, I think with that being said, with the relationships, yeah, to your point, man, it just kind of blew up. And then second office, third office, fourth, and that really was kind of in a short amount of time, which I look back on it now. At the time, it seemed like it was long, right, in between them. But now that we're talking about it, it was pretty short time frame that they were all open. But you also get to the point where it just becomes too much, right? And so that's why opening 10 offices or 15 or 20, like, financially, yes, we could do that, but it's just not what I want to do.
How many was 5 the max that you eventually reached at and then you pulled back to?
5, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about that initial expansion. What was the thoughts and emotions and things that were happening in the business that made you even want to go from 1 to 2 in the first place?
So when we had the first office and I decided to open the second office, there was a particular company in the office, and I had really tried to develop a relationship with them to get referrals back and forth, and it was just kind of, they're like, he's nobody, And I said, you know what? I'm going to open an office right down the hall from them where they have to see me every single day, okay? And at this point, it was a second office, and I'm super nervous about it, but I went and did construction, I opened it, and every single, whatever, maybe not every day, but every week at least, I walk by them and start talking with them. And, it gradually took maybe, 3 or 4 months, and then they started referring patients, and then it just kind of from there, it just blew up. But I literally opened the office down the hall because I knew they were a huge referral source for us and for us to get back to them. And I was like, you know what? They don't want to work with me, man. I'm going to open it right down the hall. And it worked out. It could not, maybe not worked out.
I think if you understand human psychology or human behavior, I think it almost was guaranteed to work out because proximity is power. Mm-hmm. And they've done studies on this. Somebody will have to quote me or look it up, but it's really interesting that one of the things, even if you never talked, you never associated with another human, they've done studies on this, that if you just regularly attend a similar place of somebody else, you generally start to just like them more, or at least become more familiar with them. Like, think about the gym that you go to. If you go to the gym and you always have your headphones on, and maybe you don't ever talk to this person, but you see them there all the time, you on some level kind of like this person, or at least are familiar with this person enough to have a conversation with them.
Right.
So it's just human behavior.
Right. Eventually.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to happen.
100%.
Yeah. So it worked out, man. I mean, it worked out in our favor, and it was a risk, right? But I would say it's a calculated risk. Let's call it that.
I actually love the tenacity. That's phenomenal. So okay. Brilliant way to open up a second location is like find someone that you want to have a referral partner with and then just open up next door. Love that. What about the third location? What was the decision marker for that one? Same thing?
You know what? I'm not going to name any names into this one. But funny story. We heard a competitor was going to open in Kyle. And I had just really opened, well, let's backtrack. The third was Pflugerville. We opened Pflugerville, and it had been open. It kind of popped off. It was doing really well. But then we heard a large competitor of ours was going to open in Kyle. And so I hurried up and went down to Kyle and found a space and built out. I mean, no, dude, that sounds terrible that I'm saying this but
It doesn't.
it
Sounds like you want to win. That's what it sounds
no,
like.
that sounds terrible, but at the same time, it was time is of the essence, right? You know, and I felt like if we didn't do it, they were going to do it. And we opened there, and then that clinic just blew up.
I mean, Kyle's a massively growing city, though, too. So,
I mean, on top of it, man, Kyle, I have a phenomenal doctor there, Dr. Hayden Story, and he essentially runs that office. And then we also have an outstanding doctor there, Dr. Austin Gaspard. So that clinic blew up. Still to this day, it's probably one of the top producing clinics out of the whole company.
well, I remember, I don't know if this is still true. Maybe it was for sure at least a year or two ago. Kyle was, I think, the fastest growing city in the country.
Yes.
So I'm not surprised.
Yeah. And I think probably around the time frame that we opened was when that was coming out. I think at that point it was like number 3, and then it ended up being number 1. Yeah, for sure. It's crazy growth.
I mean, it speaks truth to a sentiment that I was actually just talking to my fiance about recently, about when you consider all the factors that you can control in a business, like, do you want to be the cheapest, or do you want to be the fastest, or do you want to have the best service, or do you want to have the most marketing or advertisements? The number one, actually most important thing to the success of a business is a starving crowd. Or a starving audience, or a injured patient.
Right.
Right? Is like, you just want the conditions where there's just so many people that desire what you have that you're guaranteed to win. You're just going to ride the wave. It's like, like you could be the worst hot dog stand in the world, but if you're outside of the bar at 2 a.m. when people are stumbling out of the bar drunk and hungry, you're going to sell hot dogs.
And they're always there, right? Like
Right.
the street tacos and stuff. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
It's the same thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like, you
for
went
sure.
to a town that's growing, young, healthy, probably looking for a new chiropractor. Pretty high chance of success.
Yeah, for sure.
At the end of the day,
Yeah. Yeah. Putting yourself out there, right?
for sure. And
Which-
also, like, what you did from day one of, like, look what's growing. Go there
Yeah.
if you can.
Yeah, put yourself out there, and that's the hard part, right, for some people. And I think over time you gain more confidence, right? Because early on, man, it's a struggle. Like, you're trying to find yourself, right, and find out how to run a business and how to talk to patients, and you know, we could talk about that later as far as what makes a clinic successful, in my opinion. But you're learning all that over the years, right? For sure.
So we're at 3 locations now, 6 doctors, big team, building company culture. You're leading the charge at this point. You're not doing nearly as heavy as a grind. Let's shift gears a little bit into maybe some of the more tactical stuff. Something you mentioned, I believe, was Google Ads have been really successful for you guys. What is it about Google Ads, or are you doing something, anything unique or different or interesting about these, or like, why have they been successful for you guys?
Yeah. So that's been a learning lesson, let's just say that. There's a lot of companies out there that'll do SEO and Google Ads and stuff like that. I'm not going to knock them, because I've worked with some phenomenal companies, but it got to the point where they were setting up Google AdWord campaigns, and I felt like they were just letting them run and never paid attention to them, but we were getting charged massive amounts every month for management. So my director of operations and I sat down and we're like, hey, how can we do this on our own? Let's jump into this, because they're obviously not paying attention to it. Some of them did, some of them don't, but 90% didn't. So we jumped into it and learned how to set up our campaigns. We learned how to do certain keywords and things like that. So right now it's 100% managed by us right now.
What tips or advice, if you're open to sharing, would you give to anybody else that wanted to manage it themselves as well?
I want to say the book, this is crazy, I read was
Russell
like,
Brunson.
what's that?
Russell Brunson.
Nah,
Oh, okay.
I do know him though.
Okay.
Do you know him?
Well, he is very big in marketing. So,
Yeah.
But what were you
Him
going to
and
say?
Chad. So I was going to say, I think the book was like Google AdWords for Dummies.
That's not what I was thinking. That's way better.
Yeah. So I sat there and read the book, kind of had an idea of SEO and started, look, if I can give any advice to save money, if you're really hungry to do these things, is learn the back end of your website and meta tags, right? And things like that. And it's unfortunate because a lot of chiros, if you ask them, they're like, oh, what's a meta tag, right? But I think that's important for you to know as a business owner. I know that you could pay someone to do it, but why not know how to do it on your own? So right now, 100% of it is managed by us. And that would be SEO, content. I think content on your website's important, and internal links and backlinks and things like that.
Look at you.
So
Love that.
but that's something that was learned over time. And then we got to the point where like, we're just going to do this on our own.
Yeah. I think there's a both and in that statement too, though, right? Because like, I think there's knowing, but then there's also knowing where your time is most valuable.
Right.
Like a lot of the conversations that I have, like a lot of doctors that end up growing to a certain point in their business where, yeah, somebody should for sure know how these things, or the owner could potentially know how these things work as well. But at the same time, it's like they probably shouldn't be the ones like clicking the buttons, right? Like I doubt you're the one writing the meta tags or the ads, right? You just know how it works, so that if it's not working, you can be like, hey, moron, like fix this, basically.
Yeah, and it's funny that you bring this up because yesterday we had a conversation with my director of operations about at the end of this year bringing someone to revamp campaigns and redo the website and things like that.
Yeah.
So that was a conversation that was just had yesterday because you're right. You know, you want to put your time towards things that matter. So we're not actively doing so much. It's kind of more of an autopilot thing now.
100%. But you have to know enough about it to not get as you scammed. I mean, it's like going to the car dealer and knowing nothing about the vehicle that you want to buy. You're going to get hammered.
Right.
If you did, but assuming you've gone in there and you've done your research and you know what the car is worth and you know what a good car versus a bad car looks like, that's a different conversation.
Yeah. Look, full disclosure, like to chiros, don't just jump into that because you will waste, like you said, astronomical amount of money.
You'll get hammered.
Yes. And to this day, you know, to be fair, the conversation yesterday was you have 250 clicks or whatever, you know, and you have 12 conversions, you know, so what's the happy medium where, you know, so that was kind of what brought the conversation up for sure.
I've heard you say that insurance is a bit of a misconception about growing a practice and having probably good revenue, if I had to assume, or good profits, I should say. Can we dive in this a little bit? What's your beliefs around the insurance and using that as a way to build a practice or not build a practice, or should you take it? Should you not take it? Like, what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, listen, I'm going to catch heat from this from certain providers. Okay. This is my opinion. All right. What is Austin? It's a techie place, right? You have massive companies, AMD's right down the road, right? Tesla, you know, Apple, everything, right? Explain to me as a business person why, and I'm going to catch heat for it, I know. This is my opinion. The guys that are cash only and they complain about dealing with insurance and billing and collections and things like that, that's part of it, man. I mean, if you want to be a business owner and a healthcare professional, that's part of it. You have to do it. Do you get lower reimbursement every single year? Yes. Does rent and everything else go up? Yes. Okay. But explain to me this. If you work for let's just say AMD, since they're right down the road, and you paid $400 a month or $500 a month on insurance, you want to use that, right? You want to go, you're going to search for a chiropractor in your portal and you're going to find someone in your geographic location, right? Why would you go spend money? Because it's your hard-earned money, right? and this is what I've always never understood with some chiros, you have to have that understanding. These people work hard for their money. Everybody works hard, right? Do you want to spend a $10 copay or $20 copay and use your insurance, or spend $50 or $60 for an office visit? Non-insurance, right? So for the life of me, I don't understand that. This is my opinion. You are cutting yourself short on how many people that you can have an impact on. And is it a hassle to deal with insurance? Absolutely, dude. Yes, it is. I'm not going to tell you it's awesome, but why cut those people out? It doesn't make any sense to me, man. I don't get it. I'll never understand that, and I'll catch heat for it, like I said. But this is my opinion, and we're never going to go cash only. We're always going to serve people that have insurance and cash. It's just how we're going to do it.
That is the most empathetic statement I've ever heard about insurance. That's interesting.
I'm going to give you an example, and this it doesn't get me riled up, man, but there's a particular Facebook page. Okay. And on that Facebook page, you will have people ask about insurance, allowables or whatever it may be. And you'll always have some comment on there. Somebody will say cash is king. Oh, that's exactly the reason why I don't accept insurance. That's not what they were asking. They're asking for guidance and help, right? So there's always this divide between providers that are cash only and insurance. I don't get it. I don't understand. They're asking for guidance. So they're not asking you if cash is king. Okay. And it's always bothered me. I don't know why I let it get to me, but it's just a very strong opinion of mine. Like, I feel like if people have insurance, they want to utilize it. Cause if I was going to see a chiropractor, I'm going to go to someone in network. Because I'm going to tell you, the reason why I know this, man, is because there's patients that call and we may or may not be in network. Let's say we're not in network. Their immediate first response is saying, I'm going to call another chiropractor and find one in network. So you lost the patient.
I think too, probably part of it though also probably depends on like the type of care that's provided, and also like knowing your ideal patient as well, right? Because like I think in my experience they're both very different patients, right? Like when I think about somebody that has insurance, somebody that works at AMD or Apple or Tesla or whatever, and they have an insurance plan and they probably have a corporate job and they probably have a family and some kids that are also on this insurance plan, and that's a very different person than somebody that's like probably single, probably doesn't have insurance, probably like gets a lot of lab work done on some website where they have some functional they're just very different people.
Right.
So I think there's a degree of that as well, of like knowing who you're talking to, and also again, it goes back to like, I don't think either or. I think it could be both and, just depending upon the circumstance.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, I always had the feeling or the opinion or the viewpoint of, we're multi, right? Our offices are multi, cash, insurance, PI, right? Everything. So we don't just limit ourselves on just that one avenue.
So if you could go back to your younger self and give yourself one piece of business advice to go from where you were of seeing 5 patients a week to now, who knows what the numbers are with 3 locations and 6 doctors. What would you tell that person? What would you tell your younger self?
The biggest thing as a chiropractor, I feel like just being, as far as business and relationships, when I talk about relationships, man, I'm not just talking about the medical community relationships. I'm talking about relationships with the patient. I think, and I always tell my providers this, being engaged. I say this all the time, engaged in the patient. That is the biggest problem that I see with chiros, and when they're not engaged, when they don't engage with the patient and they don't educate the patient. I always say an educated patient is a compliant patient, right? So why are they coming to you, man? They're coming for answers, right? not going to talk about medical community, but you've been there, dude. You went to a doctor's appointment, you waited an hour, hour and a half, whatever. Your time's valuable. Their time's valuable, right? So the biggest thing that I could tell someone coming out of chiro school, because they don't teach you this stuff, is be engaged in the patient, not only with what's wrong with them, but their life, and listen to them, right? And give them answers, because that's why they're going there. And I would say overall, the biggest part of success in this industry, I have a strong opinion on that, is being engaged and know who you're talking with. Don't walk into the room and don't know their name. I walk into the room and I know what they did over the weekend because I ask them. I know where they're from. I think those things are important. And I think that's a big difference in a successful chiropractor and one that's just barely getting by.
Well, it rings so true to what we talked about earlier of retention, right? Is like you can get all the new patients in the door and have all these referrals and the best relationships with these doctors all day long. But if you can't keep a patient around, it's really hard to build a successful practice, if even possible at all. And you do that through exactly what you're talking about.
Right. And, one of the things for us, and I know that there's chiropractors out there that push really heavy plans, and there's some that like corrective care or pain relief. We're just not one of those offices to push big plans on people. So for us, it's super, super important for that engagement, that connection with them, because if you lose that, man, I to your point, it's just, you're constantly relying on new patients that come through the door. And I think it's a testament when you look at chiropractic offices, whenever they have people that have been going there for 8 years, and I'm not talking every week, I'm talking, we'll have someone call that has been in 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Why? Because they trust you. Why? Because you did them right. You know what I'm saying? And I have a big belief, if I could tell any person coming out into the industry, from the day that I open, I always said I'm going to treat people, patients, the way that I want to be treated and be real with them. So when I walk into the room, I'm not like, oh, I'm Dr. Shaddock. It's like, hey, what's up, man? How you doing? How was your weekend, man? Like, I want to get to know you. And I want to say, if I could contribute any success, I would say that that's probably one of the biggest parts of it, is getting to know these people and really just being you. Don't be someone don't be thinking you're superior walking in there. Walk in and listen to them, man. And I think that's what creates successful practices.
Totally. I remember, so I was at a 2-day conference this past weekend out in Orlando with a bunch of other high earning chiropractic business owners. And something that rung true that I took away from that event is they said, people come to you because of how they feel, whether it's pain or confusion or lost or whatever, but they stay for what they know, which comes down to like knowing that you care, knowing that you know what you're talking about, knowing that you know how to get them better. And I just thought that was like really profound, is they come for how they feel, but they stay for what you know. Yeah. And I just think that wraps up so much of like what would create a successful practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just be yourself. I mean, it's just, I preach this all the time to my chiros, man. Like, just be yourself. Like, go in there and listen and be what you would want someone to be as a provider,
Last question. So for the audience, or the listener, I should say, what's if someone was trying to grow their 7-figure practice and they're on their way to success for something like this, what's maybe like one action, or what would be the most important action they could take this week that would move them closer to achieving that goal? What's something they could do
to propel them to 7-figure practice?
Yeah.
I would say sit down and really look at kind of like your 2-year goal. I know people always say the 5 or 10-year goal, but I would say 2-year goal. Like, where are you at? Where do you want to be at? Because 2 years is not a long time, but enough time to really kind of accomplish something. I would say, look at that. I would get out face to face with people. I think that's important initially. And I think starting the relationship with people, because from what I've seen, and I'm not grouping everyone into this, but a lot of people just, that's the part where the chiro's cut off. They're not willing to be involved in the community or meet people, right? And that may or may not be stopping you from getting to 7 figures per office, but it's a start, right? And if you don't have those relationships with people, then it's just 7-figure office is just not feasible. It's not going to happen.
Shout out to my buddy, Dr. Scott Mitchell. He is one of the most active community. I don't think I can go to an event without seeing this guy. Really? And his practice and the success that he's achieved over the last few years speaks volumes to how involved he is with the community.
He's everywhere.
He's everywhere.
And that's how you want to be.
Exactly.
Especially in the beginning.
100%.
You know?
It's working for him.
Absolutely. And it's exhausting for him. I bet if you asked him, he's like, I'm so freaking exhausted from this. But at the end of the day, how long has he been in practice? I don't know.
3 years, maybe?
3 years, right. So he's hungry, he's young, he's good. And he'll look back 5 years from now and be like, man, that's crazy. I did all that stuff. But now look at it.
Yeah, it compounds. That's what we forget.
Yeah.
It feels like you're not doing anything in the beginning, but it compounds.
Absolutely.
What's your plug? Where can people find you? So Absolute Life Wellness Center. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Yeah, absolutelifewellnesscenter.com. Offices in South Austin, Slaughter, Manchac, Kyle, and San Marcos. Exceptional team of docs. We're there to help everyone. So